All right, and we are live. Everybody can hear me? Yep, someone said, David Jones said, let's go. All right, David, I feel you. I feel you. All right, guys. Welcome to Sabby Sab Show on FHL. Welcome to our 12-hour stream. As you guys know, today we are going from noon to midnight. Happy 4th. And we have some really good topics coming up for the rest of the day. Don't forget to join our roundtable at 4 o'clock. That's when you'll see all of us together. So this is pretty cool. I hope you guys are enjoying what you're seeing. I'm just going to go to the chat really quick. All right. Malik, hi. I saw you the other day. Well, not in person, but on chat. Hi, David. Hi, Nick. Meg. Hi, Greg. Hi, Hobo Roadie. Just like to say hi to people for a bit. Real quick, guys, before I get into the school to prison pipeline, I know some of you asked like how you can support FHL. You can actually do that by donating to our Ko-fi. You can buy us a Ko-fi. So if you look at the bottom of my screen, the phrase that you'll see scrolling, Ko-fi or ko-fi.com/FHL network. That's the best way you can support us because Patreon does take a cut and Ko-fi does not. So feel free. Hi, Marcin. Hi, James. Cool. All right. School to prison pipeline. This is a serious topic. I've been meaning to talk about this for a while. I do work in education, so this is something that is really passionate to me. A lot of times people ask, like, what does the school to prison pipeline actually mean? So I have a video that I want to play for you that pretty much sums this up. So I'm just going to share my screen. Share the screen. Make sure I share audio because that would suck if I didn't have that. All right. Everyone can see my screen. So watch this video really quick. And guys, hopefully there's no ads. Hopefully. Okay. That is very important. So one of the things is that Black students are more likely to be punished harsher than white students for the same incidents. And I've actually seen that in the education system. So what happens is you have these students, and most of them are Black, they're expelled. Now they're at home. And if they're not old enough to work, they're sitting at home by themselves, especially if their parents are out at work. So they have a lot of time on their hands. So when you continue to discipline Black students more harshly, that can affect how they feel about the school system, how they feel about their teachers. And when they come back to school, that doesn't make us like really want to try and to do our best at school because we already know that the administration has it out for Black students. So one of the comments in the chat is from James Root, and I agree with this 100%. James said that cops should never be used as security in schools. Absolutely. This is a big problem. So Awkward, some of you guys know him from 10 Demands. He's also a rapper and he's an abolitionist. When Awkward came on my show, he actually talked about this, that you have some of these schools in Black neighborhoods that the security officers are actually cops. So if you go to a city like New York, where there was stop and frisk and some of that's still going on, these kids are going from a neighborhood that is over policed to a school that is over policed. And that can have an effect on those students. So James, thanks so much for bringing that up. I agree 100%. There's another question here. Give me just a second. Yes, Giovanni. Madison Square Park High School in Roxbury, Boston is a great example of this. They have a lot of cops present in security. And I'm in Boston, so I know what Giovanni's talking about. And it's true. If you go to the white schools, you do not see that. Um, it just creates like a police presence, and you don't need a police presence at a school. So some people may ask, like, why does this happen? Like, why are Black students punished more harshly? But that actually goes all the way back to slavery. And it goes back to the mentality that people have about Black people in this country. If you go all the way back to slavery, Black people were always punished more harshly. So you have that happening in the school system, and then you have those same kids end up in the criminal justice system. And in the criminal justice system, they are also punished more harshly than white people for the same incidents. It's a pattern, right? So that's why people call it the school to prison pipeline, because it starts in the school system. Jake brought up something. This is important. He said, I volunteered at an all-Black school, and the dark-skinned female students were treated worse than light-skinned female students. This example was done by a dark Jamaican teacher. Oh, so Jake, that goes into something even further, which is colorism. And colorism is also a problem that we have in the Black community. And this is also true. But again, that also goes back to slavery. Lighter skinned slaves were, you guys may have heard this, like house slaves and field slaves. So lighter skinned slaves were in the house. Darker skinned slaves were in the field. That is where the colorism comes from with Black people. We even have that amongst each other. Because one of the things I noticed, like when I was growing up, was that, and some people, and anyone, if you're a Black female and you're watching this and you're in the chat, you can tell me if you experience this as well. Growing up, one of the things I noticed, and this has changed a little bit now, when I would see Black women on the cover of magazines, oftentimes it was a light-skinned Black female. It was a Tyra Banks. And even today, you see this with Beyonce, Rihanna. You don't see a lot of times darker skinned Black women on the cover of those magazines. Now, that is improving, but it gives the impression that lighter is better. Even in the school system, I remember the little boys being like, the dark skinned girls are dark. They used to call us Blackie. And the lighter skinned girls, they called the pretty ones. That all goes back to slavery. So we have to change these things in our own community as well. But it's not just Black people. So this goes a little bit further. And James, I'm going to take your comment off the screen here in just a second. So this goes a little bit further, because you know where else there's colorism? Other countries in America. Go to India. Go to Thailand, go to Korea. And you know what you can see in those countries? You can go into a store and you can see aisles of skin bleaching cream. One of the things I noticed that was interesting to me is that if you ever watch like Bollywood, like the movies based in India where people dance and sing and stuff, they're pretty cool movies. One of the things I noticed, and this is from my friend who's also from India, she was explaining this as well. Where she's from in India, most people, she said, look like her. They have darker skin. But when you turn on the television, most of the actors that you see have lighter skin. So colorism is not just a thing in the Black community. It's a problem globally, like skin color. I'm looking at what one of the comments in the chat. Yeah, JB said colorism is a big thing. Absolutely. It's an issue. James Root said Beyonce. Yep. And in fact, something about Beyonce, and I'm gonna get back to the school system in a second. Beyonce's dad, during an interview, he said that if Beyonce was dark skinned, she would not be as popular as she is. Her dad said that. What does that tell you about colorism? JB said, or high yellow. Yes, James Root. Korea has a huge industry of facial creams trying to lighten your face. Yep. Yep. You see that with K-pop too. Sammy Sosa, perfect example. Oh my God. I don't know who Sammy Sosa is anymore. Look at pictures of Sammy Sosa. Just Google before and after. You got to put in like skin color. Just Google Sammy Sosa before and after. I don't even know who he is anymore. Yep. Yep. So I want to show you a chart about the school to prison pipeline because this is pretty interesting. Couple of statistics here. Share my screen. All right, so everybody can see this. I'm going to try to make this a little bit bigger because they could have made this bigger. Jeez. Oh, you don't want to get bigger for me, huh? Okay, it is what it is. It is what it is. All right, I'm going to read this out to you guys. So, are our children being pushed into prison? Listen to some of these statistics. 40% of students expelled from US schools each year are Black. 40%. 70% of students involved in school arrest or referred to law enforcement are Black or Latino. 70%. 3.5 times. Black students are 3.5 times more likely to be suspended than white students. Black and Latino students are twice as likely to not graduate from high school as whites. 68% of males in state and federal prison do not have a high school diploma. Now, here's a part here about foster care to prison. Now, this was interesting. 50% of children in the foster care system are Black or Latino. 50%, you guys. That's half. 30% of foster care youth entering the juvenile justice system are placement-related behavioral cases. So again, this is another example where instead of having those children talk to counselors, talk to, community like counselors that can help them, they're placed into the juvenile justice system, which is rather interesting because when you think about drugs, for example, one of the problems we have in this country is we want to put people in jail for drugs, right? But notice how, like sometimes, especially if you're a celebrity, if a white person gets in trouble for drugs, they can go to rehabilitation. Black people are more likely to go to jail. 25% of young people leaving foster care will be incarcerated within a few years after turning 18. 50% of young people leaving foster care will be unemployed within a few years after turning 18. And that goes back to poverty being related to crime. If you don't have a job, then you don't have money. If you don't have money, then you're in poverty. If you're in poverty, you're more likely to commit crime. A good chunk of crime is poverty related. People don't like to talk about that, but it's true. 70% of inmates in California State Prison are former foster care youth. That was Kamala Harris's state. I'm going to stop share. Our friend Kamala Harris, the cop, she was a big part of that. For people who ask, how was she involved in that? Kamala Harris implemented a policy called truancy, where she was arresting parents because their kids were not in school. As you can imagine, most of those parents were Black. Now you took the kid's parent away. You took the kid's parent away, and we still expect them to succeed. Just something to think about. Going through the chat. James said, you are a foster kid in a system that rotates you like a fat blunt. Okay, James. And you expect them to be well-adjusted, good little boys and girls. Yes. Like, guys, this is something to think about. Imagine if you were taken away from your parents and you were put in another home with a new set of parents. Let's say you're only there for like a year. You're still trying to adjust. And then they take you from those parents and they put you in another home with someone else. Imagine that happening throughout your life until you're 18 years old. Who's your family? Who are you supposed to call? And you're still expected to go out into society and succeed. Black in the Empire, what's up? Good job, Sabrina. Oh, that's my mom. Hey, Mom. I can always tell if it's my parents because most people don't call me Sabrina. Okay. There's another chart I want to show you too. And this is called Breaking the School to Prison Pipeline. Let me share my screen really quick. Hopefully this one is larger on the screen. Let me look over here. All right, that's a little bit better. All right, get this. Over half of Black young men who attend urban high schools do not earn a diploma. Of the dropouts, nearly 60% will go to prison at some point. Now, this is where you have to ask, why are they not earning a diploma? Well, if you're constantly getting suspended and expelled, when you go back to school, does that really make you want to try to perform well academically? If you know a teacher has it out for you, if you know an administrator has it out for you, does that really make you want to try to succeed? Listen to this. About 92,000 students were arrested in school during the 2011-2012 school year, according to the U.S. Department of Education statistics. 92,000 kids were arrested in school. Suspensions and expulsions increased as more states began to adopt zero tolerance policies. Yep. This one's important, you guys. High schools with permanent metal detectors issued 48% more suspensions than schools without metal detectors. So here's the thing here. When you're going to school, why do you have to walk through a metal detector? Does it feel like a school to you then when you have to do that? Doesn't to me. So you're already creating an environment that will make people not want to try to succeed. %70 of high schools with permanent metal detectors have a graduation rate of less than 60%. Yes, again, walking through a metal detector, and that doesn't mean you have a weapon. Okay, that doesn't mean you have a weapon. How many guys, this is a question for the guys, because I know this is more common amongst men. How many of you had a pocket knife? Guys tend to have these. I forget why. But how many of you had like pocket knives? Just as like a kid, like growing up. Sometimes it's attached to like other tools. Like one may be like a hook or something like that, right? So if you walk through a metal detector, that's going to go off. Doesn't necessarily mean you were trying to harm anyone. You just have a pocket knife. 61% of incarcerated population are Black or Latino, although Blacks and Latinos only represent 30% of the US population. But we're more than half of the prison population. That right there goes to show you. So this is why, like, when conservatives come to you and they make that argument and they say, well, there's more Black people and Latinos in prison because they commit the most crime. Make sure you bring these numbers back to them. Because even if we did commit the most crime, that still does not make any sense. The numbers don't make any sense. 61%. Only 30% of the US population. That means we are targeted more, and that means we are punished more. 74% of arrests in New York City public schools in 2012, according to a report published by the state courts, were for misdemeanors or civil violations. Why are we arresting students for misdemeanors and civil violations? New York City, where they also had stop and frisk. 74%. Nearly 68% of all men in federal prison never earned a high school diploma. Again, school to prison pipeline. I'm going to pop out because I see a lot of comments in the chat. So I'm going to go to some of the comments. Ooh, this is a good one. Are Black kids safer in all Black schools with mainly Black teachers? I'm going to open that up to the audience as well. Guys, feel free to comment if you've had that experience. That's a good question, Jake. Some people will say yes. Some people will say no. Some people say it doesn't matter. Because I think at the end of the day, even if you are in that situation, if that all Black school is still heavily policed, then I would say you're still not safe. But that's a good question. Robert Lowe said utility knives are called tools when you're white. Damn. That's interesting. But Rob knows what I'm talking about. Because like some of the guys like in my high school, they used to have those. They used to carry those like on their keychain, stuff like that. Okay, JB responded to Jake's question about if Black kids are safer if they're going to an all Black school and have all Black teachers. So JB said, not necessarily, Jake. I went to a majority Black school. I think JB might elaborate on that in a second. Malik commented as well, probably within the school, yes, but they're probably policed and don't get funding. Yes. So a lot of the schools in like these Black, like urban communities are underfunded. They're under-resourced. I walked into a school in Boston. I'm not going to say the name because I don't want to put them on blast like that. But I walked into a school in Boston. They didn't have a computer lab. So I'm like, okay, you're telling the students that they need to type papers, but there's no computer lab. And they say, well, they can use the computer that they have at home. But what if their parents can't afford to get them a computer? That makes it harder for you to get your work done. In this day and age, no computer lab. And it was in a Black neighborhood, predominantly Black school. So yes, Malik, that is very true. Andrew said how elite colleges are failing disadvantaged students. Yes. So working at a university, this is very problematic. And I do work at an elite college, as Andrew put it. The biggest problem that I see is that those schools like the Stanfords, the Princetons, the Harvards, those schools primarily, the people that they tend to help the most tend to be students that are white. And especially up here in the Boston area, students that are Asian. The international students, but the international students are usually not Black international students. So yes, that is true, Andrew. They are failing them. And a lot of that has to do with lack of financial aid. A lot of that has to do with lack of resources and counseling for, students that are Black and Latino at these elite schools. These schools are very expensive. I'm talking like Harvard is what, like $55,000, $56,000 a year. And that's just the tuition. So if you're coming from a disadvantaged public education and you're going to an elite college like Harvard or like Yale, you are already at a disadvantage, whether you know it or not. Even if you were the smartest kid in your high school, you are already at a disadvantage because the majority of the students coming to those schools, they're coming from high schools that were heavily funded and were heavily funded because of property taxes. They already had more resources than you. So what happens is the Black kids that come to those schools, yeah, they got a scholarship. Yeah, they may have gotten some financial aid, but they have to work twice as hard to do well because they didn't have the resources from where they were coming from. Not to mention, some of these schools don't give out enough financial aid. And I think Andrew knows what I'm talking about. If you can pay college presidents 6 figures, if you can pay college presidents $1 million, $2 million, you can give out more financial aid. College presidents, these universities, they don't even pay for their house. The school pays for it. So what are we paying them $1 million for? That's a whole nother time. That's a whole nother video I could do, you guys, about how universities waste money, how they don't fund things the way they need to be funded, how they just throw money out the window. And then they complain about not having enough underrepresented minority students. If you really wanted to get us there, you could get us there. Go into some of the comments in the chat. So Red said corporations took over the schools, just like they took over Congress, to roll back gains from the civil rights era. Oof. Oh boy, that's a good one. That's a good one. Sorry, the comments are coming in really fast, you guys. That's why I'm trying to. Andrew said Boston's education system is extremely stratified. Agreed. Agreed. To add on to that, you guys may not know this. Did you guys know that in Boston, we still have busing? Did you guys know that? That's still like a thing here. It's called the Mecca program. Andrew probably knows what I'm talking about, where if you're a kid and you're living like in Roxbury, Dorchester, like Mattapan, East Boston, your family can enter a lottery. And what this lottery does, it's a chance for you to be able to go to, I hate to say it, but one of the white schools. That's really what it is. And so if you win the lottery, you get the opportunity to go to a school in Newton, go to a school in Lexington, go to a school in Acton, And I say those places because those are the more wealthier elite communities here. So you are busing a kid from Roxbury all the way to Newton so that they can go to the school that has more resources. They can go to the school where those students are more likely to get into Harvard. Universities like to recruit people by zip codes. A lot of people don't know that. This is something you got to work in the system to see this. That's why, like, a student that goes to Newton South High School has a better chance of getting into Harvard than a student that went to school in Roxbury. Zip codes are important. But yes, they still have busing. That's still like a thing here. Instead of fixing the schools that are in those Black neighborhoods, you're sending a kid on a bus to go all the way over to Newton. And what does that tell that child? So this opens this up to a bigger question, you guys. What does it tell the Black kid in 2021 that is leaving their community in Roxbury to go to a white community so that they can go to the school that has more resources? Then they leave that school at the end of the day and they go all the way back home to Roxbury, where they may have to just seen that their friend just got shot. What does that tell that child? Why can't they fix the schools in those neighborhoods? Property taxes. So again, we have to stop funding schools based on property taxes. That in itself is inherently racist. People don't bring that up a lot, but it is, because you already know that the schools in the Black neighborhoods are going to be underfunded, especially in the urban communities, because most people can't afford to own a house in Boston. Go into the comments in the chat. Finney, glad you bring up the absurdity of how property taxes pays for school. Like, duh, the rich will only be taken care of. Economic mobility is such an illusion. Absolutely. Absolutely, Finney. It's a hot mess. And this goes back to white flight too, you guys. When white people left the cities and moved to the suburbs, let's all remember Black people weren't invited in. That goes back to housing discrimination. So for the Black families that could afford to do that, I'm like, hey, I'm going to move to the suburbs too, because that's where the better schools are. Black people weren't invited in. Housing discrimination. So you kept the Black people in the urban communities in the city where the schools were failing. That's like saying to a kid, hey, I'm sorry, but because you're poor, you don't get to have a decent education. How messed up is that? Guys, just think about what I just said. How messed up is that? You are being punished because you were poor. Meg had a comment. It's so true. It's proven your zip code determines more of your future than anything else. Preach. Yes. This is so true. I keep telling people I've seen this stuff. I've sat on admissions committees. I've done the work. I've seen it. I've seen kids get rejected from universities that had the grades and had the GPA, had the extracurricular activities. I've seen them get rejected simply because of their zip code. This is happening in the United States, 2021. Kids can't help where they grow up, man. Kids can't help where they grow up. Virtual Jonathan said, but the really rich people don't send their kids to public schools either. That's true. Like the really, really rich people, their kids are usually at private school. But I can tell you, like, wealthy families here in Massachusetts, they don't have to do that. They can, but they don't have to do that. You know why? Because Massachusetts is number one for public education in this country. So you can live in a Dover Sherburne and send your kid to public school. You can live in Lexington, Massachusetts, and send your kid to public school. You can live in Concord, Massachusetts, and send your kid to public school. You know why? Because those schools are highly ranked. But if you can't afford to buy in those communities, and most people in Massachusetts cannot because we have a huge wealth disparity here, you don't get the opportunity to send your kids to those schools, or if you win the lottery, they can get bused there. Isn't that something? Sorry, guys, there's a lot of comments I'm trying to get through. Oh my God. Yes, Finney, you are forcing your kids to be overworked and compete at a higher level for college. Yep. Greg says, oh shoot, where'd that comment go? Oh, here we go. Greg says, I knew brilliant kids in my high school that got rejected from Harvard and Yale, while average kids from wealthier towns got in easily. Yes, guys, I'm telling you, we see this all the time. Your zip code. Jake said college is overrated. You know what, Jake? I'm right there with you, bud. I'm right there with you. And I have a bachelor's and a master's degree. And sometimes I wonder, what was it all for? James Root says, magnet schools, just another cute label to make you feel like they are missing out on something. They aren't. Magnet schools aren't some golden ticket. Oof, my God. Okay, so for people who don't know, some places call them magnet schools. Some places call them charter schools. Similar concept. You have to test into these schools. You have to be chosen. So, for example, Boston Latin, you have to test into it, but you still have to be chosen. And charter schools are becoming a problem because that doesn't fix the public education system. Because what happens is the students who get into those charter schools, they're the best of the best at that school. They're the best of the school that they're coming from. So the students who are not performing as highly, they're stuck at the crappy school. What kind of message does that send? What are we doing here? The education system in this country, what are we doing here? It's like, oh, screw you. Sorry, but you weren't one of the best students in the school, so you're stuck at this one. You don't get to go to the charter school. You don't get a chance at a better education. That's what we're doing in this country, man. And it happens predominantly to Black and brown people. That's what we're doing. They are setting you up to fail when they tell you that all you have to do is do well in school, and then you can get into college, and then you can get a good job, and that will get you out of the poverty cycle. No. For people that happens to, those people are the exception. LeBron James is the exception. And for record, I love everything that LeBron James does for his community. He gives back a lot. But what you guys have got to understand is that is not the norm. The majority of people in poverty don't get out of poverty because of the education system. It's a cycle. It is hard being poor. It is hard getting out of being poor. When people bring up Ben Carson, conservatives like to bring him up a lot. Why can't all Black people just do what Ben Carson did? He grew up in poverty. He became a surgeon. He did well. Ben Carson is the exception. JB said, being poor is expensive. Yep. Your life costs 2.3 times as much as a poor person than you do being wealthy. Yes. Yep. Giovanni said, Black capitalism and individualism will not liberate Black people. Racists and capitalists think of LeBron, MJ, and other famous Black folk to undermine systemic racism. Yes. That's why I'm telling you guys, these people, they are the exception. The exception. And you shouldn't have to. And this is another thing when they say, well, what about all the Black players in the NBA? Guys, it is extremely difficult to get into the NBA. Some of the best basketball players don't get into the NBA. And you shouldn't have to be great at a sport to get out of poverty. So when people come at you with that line, don't fall for that. Christian, I love this podcast live. Thanks, Christian. Yes, Andrew, I'm so glad any sport. That's true, Holly. I lost Andrew's comment. Where'd it go? Oh, here it is. Oh, nope, that's not it. Sorry, guys. Sometimes when they come in fast. All right. Andrew said, fun fact, Boston has only one public college. Yep. Most people don't know that. Out of all the colleges that you have in Boston, and there are a lot of them here. That's why people call it a college town. Only one of them is public. Why is that? Why is that? Anybody know? Who are they trying to keep out? Black in the Empire said, if you notice, most of the Black people they quote are making money for entertaining white people. Oh my God. Ooh. Oh my gosh, that's brutal. That's brutal, but it's facts. Facts. Let's see what else we got. Margot said, not only that, but youth sports are expensive too. Paying to sign up, uniforms, equipment, gas money for travel. Dude, let me tell you. How many of you played sports in school? You played sports coming up? Anybody? Anybody? So I played sports and I was in the band. And because my parents were military and we were overseas, we were in Dodge schools. So the Dodge schools, they paid for everything. So like I was on the basketball team. We didn't have to pay for our uniforms. When I was in the band, I didn't have to pay for my clarinet. Like the Dodge schools, they pay for everything, right? And I always wondered, like, why can't we do that with all the other schools in the United States? Why is that benefit only given to people who serve in the military industrial complex? Why is that? Anywho, when we came back to the States and I went to high school in North Carolina, that was when I realized this stuff costs money. So like to be in the marching band is expensive. The uniform, the instruments, the trips that you have to travel to go on. I was on my high school debate team. Those trips weren't cheap. Those trips weren't cheap. I was lucky. I got a lawyer to sponsor me for my high school debate team. He wrote me a check for all of my trips that year. My parents didn't have to pay for anything. Didn't even know the guy. Don't remember his name. But for some reason, he took a chance on me. Thank you. I appreciate that. Giovanni said, getting into the NBA is so difficult. In fact, I would argue that recruiting more Black people to join the NBA proves that systemic racism exists because they don't want to go to the root. They don't want to go to the root cause. It's true. Again, like I said, most people are not going to make it in. The liberation that LeBron and Jay-Z represent is the idea that the equity for Black people to also own slaves. Look at the factories that make their brand clothing. Ooh, ouch. That reminds me of Nike. That reminds me of Nike. Oh, Meg, I love this. Make them all public. Harvard should be UMass Cambridge. I like that name. That's cute. I know Harvard wouldn't go for that, though. I knew they would not go for that one. Too much money involved. Wise old snail said, Mariana, people are kept poor to stop us having time to revolt. Well, because think about it. If you're working all the time, you're distracted. It's a good point. Youth sports are just a moneymaker. Basketball. Yeah, the stuff is expensive, man. So listen to this, guys. This is what I was trying to tell you. My son had okay grades and went to the local University of Massachusetts. So that's public, right? He has a $30,000 debt for a public health BS college degree. We are not wealthy. I'm only one income. So, guys, listen to what Quaker Socialist is saying. Her son went to University of Massachusetts. Okay, that's a state school. That's a public state school. And he has $30,000 debt from a public state school. Cat, any local solution? I think that's solutions. Or is it solutions? Cat, did you mean solutions or solutions? Oh, well, we're going to roll with it. To property taxes and school funding, school board elections, mayor elections, thoughts. I'm opening that up to everybody because we do like to talk about possible solutions as well, not just the problems. But I personally, we have to stop funding schools with property taxes. We just have to stop doing it. Do I think that's going to happen anytime soon? No, I don't. I don't. But that's something that it needs to change. Because again, like I said, if you're in a poor community, that means your school is going to be under-resourced. It's going to be underfunded. It's such a slap in the face, man. Guys, I've walked into schools that didn't have heat in the winter. I walked into schools where kids were sitting in the classroom with their coats on. How can you learn like that? In a cold classroom with your coats on. And you're still supposed to ace those standardized tests. You're still supposed to perform very well and succeed. And all of that with no computer lab. School board elections and mayoral elections. Yeah. So one of the things that Marianne Williamson recommended when I interviewed her is that we need more people. We need more like people, Black people, Latinos on school boards. And I agree with that. Because they're the ones making a lot of these decisions. And we're often not represented. Mayor elections. All right. Now, this is the thing that I say to people. I told you guys I don't have a lot of faith in electoral politics. Thank you, the squad. And thank you, DNC and Bernie and everybody who like killed my hope in that. But I do say that if you are going to participate in politics, your best bet at accomplishing change is going to be these local politics. It's running for mayor. It's running for city council. I would actually recommend you start with city council before you go to mayor because mayors take on a lot of heat sometimes. But I say this because I've seen people go into these positions and actually implement change. When Marty Walsh became mayor of Boston, he made a lot of changes. Some of them were not so great, but some of them were good. So I think that is your best bet if you really want to see change around here. Running for president is not gonna do it. Just checking the comments really quick. So Meg brought up a good point. She said that meal plans are also expensive. So this is another thing too. I feel that universities really need to change. There are some universities that for your freshman year, you have to purchase a meal plan. Why? Everybody knows it's cheaper to buy your own food, not on campus. Campus food is expensive and is often not as good. Why are we making them purchase a meal plan? Why? There are some colleges here, your freshman year, you have to live on campus. Why? If you live at home with your parents and you just want to commute, go to your classes, go back home and not have to pay for dorm rooms, why can't you do that? Because college is a business. It's all about money. All about money. I keep hitting my table. I don't know what's happening. JB said, wait, meal plans. Mm-hmm. Okay, JM, this is a good question. Feel bad not knowing this, but what kind of change can city council implement? That sounds like a really interesting idea. Ooh, okay, so good one. So I actually interviewed someone that is running for city council in Boston. And one of the things that he's trying to do is change some of the licenses around businesses in Boston. So that's some of the things that you could do like in your district. So one thing that was done here, and Ayanna Presley was a part of this, like before she was a part of the squad. Um, the restaurants and lounges in Boston, the white lounges and the black lounges, one of the problems was the black lounges, they didn't have, you had to get an extra permit. There was another type of license that you had to have for like selling alcohol. And then there's one for like food and all this different stuff. Anyway, long story short, these things are expensive, right? So if you're trying to start a business and you can't afford that license, that can actually mess with your revenue. I mean, no one wants to go to a lounge that doesn't sell any alcohol, right? So there's things around that, but she actually was one of the people. This was again before she ran for Congress. She was a part of local politics here in Boston that she really pushed for and said, "No, we have to give the licenses to the black lounges and the black bars because otherwise we're not going to have many black businesses here in Boston because they can't afford to get these things, which we don't have a lot of black businesses here anyway to begin with compared to other cities I've lived in. But that was a really important change that helped black lounges and bars here in Boston. And a lot of people don't know about that. So yeah, city council, you can help a lot more for your district. And then Wide's Old Nail. Oh shoot, I just realized the time. I got to get off here in a second. Okay. Wide's Old Nail, city council controls budgets so they can give less money to police and more to tutoring and after school projects. Yep. That's true. That's true. JB Font, council member Kashrama Sawan, I'm sorry, Kashrama, I always mispronounce her name, implemented a policy in Seattle that makes it illegal to evict a family that has a child in school. Those are some of the things that you can do. That's why I tell people, if you're going to do it, start on the local level, man. Optimism. All legalized weed businesses should go to those who suffered under weed criminalization. Oh boy, we need to do a whole nother segment about that. Because you guys know it's legal here in Massachusetts and we have shops here in Massachusetts, but most of the people that profit off of it are white and most of the people in prison for it here in Massachusetts are black. That hasn't been changed. And I challenge Governor Baker to change that because I see weed shops popping up all the time around Massachusetts, but you still have all these black people in prison here in Massachusetts for weed. So got to rectify that, bud. Revolutionary Drew said Warren too. Oh, don't get me started on Elizabeth Warren. All right, guys, I only got 2 minutes left, so I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up. But anyway, I hope that you learned something from this today about the school to prison pipeline system, that some of the changes that we need to make in the school system to make things better. We got to stop funding schools with property taxes. And we have to like really pay attention to when people talk about these incarceration rates, we need to go all the way back to the school system, follow that person's path. If someone is repeatedly becoming an offender and they're repeatedly going back and forth into the prison system, follow that person's path before they got there. And oftentimes the criminal justice system doesn't do that. They just look to see if they have a rap sheet, but they don't follow what happened to them before they had that rap sheet. That's why we need more counselors and we need more people to do interventions and educate people and be there for people as support groups as well. I'm signing out. It's 2:59. JB's about to pop on. Guys, don't forget to come back at 4 p.m. for the roundtable as well. Thanks so much for tuning in. And again, you'll be streaming with us until midnight. Peace.